Which entrance is that he's heading towards?
The back entrance.
Are you following him?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't need you to do that.
Mr. Dofke, we've now heard the comments about these and another comment under the breath there.
Gotcha.
Why did you ask if all of a sudden just bust out with the question about are you following him? Where did that come from and why did you ask?
It sounded like movement and wind coming through the phone after he stated that the subject was running, so I immediately asked if he was following.
You heard that kind of thing before?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that why you asked?
Yes, sir.
And when you said, we don't need you to do that, I'm just going to ask you, how come you don't or didn't say, you know, order the person to stop and don't follow and anything like that? Why did you phrase it like you phrased it?
The reason we do that is because we're directly liable if we give a direct order.
Well, there you have it. Let's bring in now News 13 legal analyst Mark NeJame, who's standing by. Mark, I'm curious to know what you think about that and how that's going to play into this case.
Well, you know, the state's having a good day, and I think they've really done a remarkable job from their opening statement to the first few witnesses that they put on to start taking a real explanation in simple terms to the jurors. You know, they just kind of started at the very beginning with his stepbrother and then kind of just taking it from there. So I'm real impressed with the way they've laid it out. And now they've got the defense reeling back a bit. The defense went ahead and stipulated that the business records could come in, but the state, very artfully, and if they know what they were doing, they're trying to get in these other calls, attempting to paint a portrait of George Zimmerman as somebody who might be prejudiced, who had a short fuse, who got so frustrated that these people always get away, and they're going to want to show a history that he's made other calls. Well, as the defense was arguing, prior bad acts, of which this really would not be one, is otherwise typically inadmissible. But the state is wanting to show that, one, they got it in through business records, but additionally it's going to show a state of mind. It's going to show where George Zimmerman was at that place and time in his mind when he saw Trayvon Martin, and all these past issues are what culminated to bring him to the point of the confrontation and the ultimate and untimely and sad death of Trayvon Martin. So, you know, you're starting to see a battle royale already starting. But I will tell you that the state definitely owns this day, which is typically not unexpected because the state is the one that puts on the case initially. So it usually sides to the state at the beginning part of a case. But not only were their witnesses have they been strong, but their opening statements were really spectacular. They just did a fabulous job of taking all the points that were important to them and with emotion weaving that in with the evidence that they believe they're going to present. So this day is definitely owned by the state, and I think that the defense really has to do a lot of work to try to you know, even the playing field, because right now they are stronger than I think most people would have thought they would have been at this early stage of the game.
Hey, Mark, I'm going to jump ahead here. Since you brought up the state, if we could, producers, pull up that soundbite from John Guy when he was talking about Trayvon Martin being profiled in his opening statements. They were the first up to bat. We want to play that for you and then get your take on it, since you believe they had a very good day today. Let's take a listen.
Trayvon Martin, 21 days removed from his 16th year, was face down in wet grass, laboring through his final breaths on this earth. And that defendant, at that same time, was upright, walking around, preparing to tell law enforcement why it was he had just profiled, followed, and murdered an unarmed teenager. Ladies and gentlemen, the truth about the murder of Trayvon Martin is going to come directly from his mouth. From those hate-filled words that he used to describe a perfect stranger.
All right, that was Guy, who is no stranger to doing this. He's been on the job here for 20 years or so. You know, there's been a lot of talk about using that term profiled. In the opening statements, it was some question about a motion on the table about not being able to say it. The judge said you could say it in opening statements. How would you rate how the prosecution used it?
Professional, poised, perfect. They simply did not mention race, and they didn't need to. They danced all around it. They let the jury come to their own conclusions about it. But the word profile is such a powerful word that they used it artfully, and they used it effectively. So without crossing the line, without getting a reprimand from the judge, without any objections from the defense, they got in the exact point that they wanted to make without once having to mention the word race.
Very interesting. Let's talk about a little bit about the defense here. Don West, who then came up to give his opening statement here. And you know what, Mark? Many will argue, and I would say, just in my opinion, that some of his strongest remarks that he made about this case came towards the end. There's been a lot of talk about Trayvon Martin being unarmed just with that bottle of fruit juice. And, of course, the Skittles has become so synonymous with this case. But he said that's not necessarily the case. Listen to this.
If I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times, that Trayvon Martin was unarmed. What the evidence will show you is that's not true. Trayvon Martin armed himself with the concrete sidewalk and used it to smash George Zimmerman's head. No different than if he picked up a brick or bashed a head against a wall. That is a deadly weapon.
Mark, what do you think? You think he made his point with the jurors?
That point was well taken, but that's the kind of thing the defense should have been doing all throughout. They must have thrown out a couple dozen names to the jurors as far as the witnesses' names and their involvement. Too technical, too time-consuming, and it did not, in my opinion, of course we can't see the jurors, but from reading my reading my blogs, reading the Facebook, reading Twitter, and across the board, it seems like he lost the jury. He should have focused on those issues. A 2-hour opening statement was way too long. Should have taken those PowerPoints that you just heard and brought them together, effectively countering what the state was saying, and then come in and land a couple of strong punches at the end. It's pretty clear that they regrouped a little bit after the lunch break, which was very fortuitous. Normally it's not. Last thing you ever typically want is to get broken in the middle of your, when you're on a roll, but a roll he was not on. So I think that O'Mara got together with West, and they said, no, this is not effective. And then Don West came out stronger to start, but then started fading again and started to bring in all these witnesses' names and getting really, really too, I think, hyper-technical for the opening statement. But you know, we're not there to see the jurors. I'm very interested in hearing what some of the observers, the courtroom observers, have to say about this, because you know we were all surprised. And I hate to make the parallel, but with the Casey Anthony case, because outside observers, we were very unimpressed by and large with the defense. However, the jurors obviously saw something different. And I'm interested in seeing, is that what's going on here? Are the jurors watching the defense? Are they seeming bored? Are they seeming focused? Because we're not really getting that. All we're watching is you know, the defense put their case on with the screen. And also, they had a lot of graphs and diagrams and such they were using. We couldn't see them, which makes it all the more difficult to follow it. But if you're there and you're watching the actual diagram, it might make it easier to follow. But I will have to tell you, this day, without question, goes to the state.
All right, very good, Mark. Well, our courtroom reporter, Amanda Evans, just actually walked into the mobile unit tonight at 6. She's going to give you an update about what those jurors were doing, because you're right, it's those body language and those signals that they give about whether or not they are tuned in to what's being said right now. All right, coming up in just a few minutes, we're going to talk about the talker of the day. Of course, that knock-knock joke. What are people saying about it online? We're going to get into it in just a few minutes. Stay with us. Jackie, let's send it back to you.
I'd like to tell you a little joke. I know how that may sound a bit weird in this context under these circumstances. But I think you're the perfect audience for it. As long as you if you don't like it or you don't think it's funny or inappropriate, that you don't hold it against Mr. Zimmerman. You can hold it against me if you want, but not Mr. Zimmerman. I have your assurance You won't? Here's how it goes. Knock, knock. Who's there? George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman, who? All right, good. You're on the jury.
Some interesting comments today. Day one of testimony in the books in the George Zimmerman murder trial. And as we just heard, there was some interesting things that came out today. Let's introduce our folks who are helping us get through all of this. That would be News 13's Kelly Cook, who is out at the Seminole County Criminal Justice Center, along with Christine Webb, who is monitoring our chat, and our legal analyst, Mark NeJame. And Kelly, I don't think that joke got the response that Don West was exactly looking for.
Well, you know what, Jackie, what was most interesting that I think not a lot of people have been paying attention to was the reaction to Bernie De La Rionda. I mean, he has a tendency to let his feelings show on his face, but there it was very clear he didn't think it was funny. And well, it seems like he was a little bit appalled by that knock-knock joke. So they took a recess and they went to lunch. And when they came back, Don West got a chance to finish his opening statement. But before he got back into the evidence, he had a quick apology for the jury.
No more bad jokes, I promise that. I'm convinced it was the delivery, though. I really thought that was funny. I'm sorry if I offended anyone about that. Mr. Guy made several statements to you this morning that were passionate. They were obviously passionate. They were said strongly. But without much detail to back it up. My focus is on the detail, and if I have to sacrifice passion, it's not because I don't feel passionate about this case. It's been my life's work for the last year. But it's because I don't want that to get in the way, even if it means it's boring or somewhat technical. I want the information before you that you may consider in evaluating the evidence.
All right, News 13 legal analyst Mark NeJame is standing by with more. Okay, Mark, you have said, you've been very clear, you did not like that knock-knock joke. You thought it came off a little bit of a thud with the jury. But did you like the comeback as trying to discredit a little bit of John Guy and his opening statement?
I like the effort, but I don't like the way it played out, no. I think that a simple, I'm sorry, I was trying to add a little levity in this otherwise tense proceeding. If I offended anybody, I am sorry, and then move on. But then to try to make it, I thought it was funny and all that, it just didn't work, and it was saying too much. And you know, it's a real shame because Don West has a terrific reputation. He's a lawyer's lawyer and well-regarded, well-respected by judges and lawyers alike throughout Central Florida. But this was not his best day, and I think he would admit that. The reality of it is that this did not work. He did not have that relationship or connection with the jury at this early stage. And to start out with a joke concerning a homicide case, and where his client's looking at life in prison and a young man is dead, it just was not a good thing to do, and it showed. It didn't, from what we picked up, the jurors didn't respond with anything positive. You look at the back of the gallery and all the people there, and nobody thought it was appropriate. And I think that it was an effort to loosen people up and to get them to like him, and unfortunately it had the counter effect, and I think it was just an unfortunate thing. And all they can do now, like anybody in a situation like this, they have to pick themselves up, as the old song goes, dust themselves off and start all over again. But they've got some ground to make up. This was not a good opening for the defense in any way, shape, or form. And anybody who would say otherwise simply is so stuck on their ideas of George Zimmerman's innocence that they're not looking at the fact. The fact of the matter is this jury knows very little about this case, and they're looking and listening to the lawyers, and many of them are really hearing much about this case for the first time. So the defense has a lot of work to do, and the state had a terrific first day.
All right, thank you very much.
But meanwhile, we are